What's up? Welcome. I am so glad you are here listening and spending time with me today. Release Your Inner Power talks about life, the trenches, the decisions, and the wins that we have now, today, and that have experienced in our past. There are stories, encouragement, tools, and tips to take those next steps to release that inner power and connect with something that is said or someone, a special guest maybe, that will boost your week. I am your host, Shauna B. Here we go. Real quick, I want to add, because it's summer and we're out having fun and recharging and making memories with my family, that these episodes are the most popular episodes of this last year. I hope you enjoy what these awesome, amazing ladies have to offer. Hello. Welcome back to Release Your Inner Power podcast. We have a special guest on, featured mom today, who is near and dear to me, and I can't wait to share her with you. Her name is Brooke. Welcome, Brooke, to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to see what you have to share today. I'm going to start with the first question, which is, tell us your story and what makes you you.
All right. Well, I am a 42-year-old mom of 3 boys, been married for 12 years. I am the oldest in my family, so there's that. And I have been working at my job for 17 years. I manage a dental office, and it's been quite a roller coaster there, because I became a mom at 19. And I was a grocery cashier at the time, and then I needed to find an office job or something where it was daycare hours. And so it was kind of a scramble, and I ended up, first I needed daycare. And so I ended up having another mom come through my line with infant Tylenol. And I looked at her and I was like, "Where is your daycare?" And then she's like, "Oh, it's so great. It's right around the corner." And then that's where I ended up getting my first daycare, which she's amazing, and we're still friends to this day. And then after only like 6 months, I ended up figuring out that I was getting laid off because they couldn't fit my hours. And so my daycare lady said, "Oh my gosh, there's these parents that they just lost their office person and they run a dental office. And she connected us. And I had no experience whatsoever. I'm like, I worked at Blockbuster Video and I answered the phones there. I did customer service being a grocery cashier, but that was it. And anyway, I got the job and I worked for them for 5 years, and they sold the practice. And then I ended up getting another job, and I've been at that same dental office since 2006. That's 17 years.
The first one that you went to was also a dental office, yes?
Yeah. So they were 2 dentists. It was a husband and wife dentist, and their office person, they had a couple of them, and the office manager had decided to stay home after having a baby and not go back to work. And so then one of their other office gals got promoted to manager, and then they had a position at the front desk. And so I learned everything I know from there. And then I've just kind of moved up. I'm a little bit of I get a little determined, and I can't just stay in one spot. I'm always looking for, what's my goal now? What about now? What's next? I always got to be shooting for something. And so after a few years working at that office, I was promoted to office manager. And then after COVID, I have 3 boys. One of them is now 23. The other one's almost 12 and then just turned 9. And so I was really needed at home. My husband works as a UPS driver, and he's just never home. And so it was really challenging to manage a dental office and then also need to not be there if my kids are sick or if there's something going on. And so that was too much pressure for me. So I ended up giving my notice in September of 2020. And my boss is also one of my best friends. And she was just like, but wait, don't go.
Yeah, don't leave.
How can we make this work? What do you need? How can we work? And anyway, and so my position kind of morphed and transitioned to where now I'm not the office manager, I'm business manager. And so I do all of the behind the scenes reconciling the accounts and doing reports and kind of consulting here and there, and was able to reduce my hours some. And that's what I've been doing for, I can't even believe it, but January of 21 was when I stopped being in the office all the time. And then I started a couple months later just going in on Wednesdays. So I at least had some FaceTime. And now, um, just recently, there's been some developments. And so I might start being in the office more often. But January, this next January, will be 3 years that I haven't been consistently there, which is just nuts. I mean, time is so weird.
When you say consistent, are you saying like you work from home and then when you said just to have some FaceTime, you would like pop in like once a week, but your main like how you operate is from home, so you're with your kids too?
Yeah. And so ideally, I wanted to. So even when I was at the office, I was able to work like 9 to 3. And so I was still able to be home with my kids, which was amazing. And I was there 4 days a week. But I have my middle son has some extra needs, and he was really struggling, and so was my older son. And so there was a lot of things that was really like pulling my attention away. And then with my middle son, he also had some just health and allergy, just to the point of where it was absolutely ridiculous how many times I was getting a call and you need to come get your kid. And then if they have any cough, they had to be gone for like a week. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't do this.
Yes.
And so I just hate, like, absolutely hate the feeling of people relying on me and then me letting them down. And that was just happening too often at work. And I just couldn't take it anymore. It made me want to crawl out of my skin. So I was like, instead of me feeling like I'm failing at both things, how about I, cut back the energy that I need to give to the office and focus more on the nuclear family?
Yeah.
And it's been really good. It's been actually quite amazing. I've been able to focus on just prioritizing, kind of getting out of some of those old crunch cycles of like the crazy stressful mornings, and, being able to wake them up an hour before. And I mean, I can't even believe this. If you would have told me, if you would have told me when I was 19 and 20 and 21 and the mornings I had then versus the mornings I have now, I would have never believed you. That like, sometimes I just get up an hour before and we make pancakes and play games before they go to school. I would have been like, yeah, right. but but yeah, it's made a big difference because we're all different. And I totally was raised by a mom that's the like throw something in your face and go, and it was all this hurried chaos in the morning. And so of course I duplicated that, always running late, always going, oh my gosh, driving from Everett to Shoreline, and if there was any little hiccup in traffic I was going to be late. And I didn't want to live that way. And my second child kind of didn't allow me to. So he needs time to get up and wake up and get moving. He can't just go, okay, we're going. It's like, no, that doesn't work. We need to have some time for him to get past the, I don't want to go to school. Everything is horrible. I hate all things. I'm sick. My tummy hurts. My head hurts. I'm like,
I
okay,
have
well,
one of those too. He
I'm
is
like,
also my middle child.
yeah.
That's funny.
And so I'm like, okay, if I gave him enough time to like actually wake up, have a good meal, get some time to communicate all of those things, but then still push past it, it made a world of difference.
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention also therapy and medication, but we can get to that later. Or
Yeah,
not.
there's something to be said about, like being intentional too with the time in the morning when like they need that extra time, and it seems like what you got to get up earlier and just, it's like throwing your whole routine that you had off to try this new thing, but then once you actually get through and push through it, you're like, why did I not do this like however many years ago?
Well, and it's not who I am. I don't know that I would have been capable back then, honestly. Like I have always, since you know me, I have always since high school, as long as I can remember, if I could choose sleeping a little longer versus anything, I'm like, I don't need to wear makeup. I can just wear jeans and a hoodie every day. I
Yeah.
don't need to like I could literally like pop up, brush my teeth, out the door, hair in a bun. Like that was my preference, you
Yeah.
know? It didn't make sense to me that people would get up and spend a half an hour in front of the mirror. I'm like, what? I don't want to do that. It was just not at all my priority. And then when you have a kid, it's like, yeah, right. I mean, I had to get up a half an hour before just because it's like, okay, what do I need? And socks don't match. And, it was just chaos.
Yeah.
The socks don't match wasn't even, that's like a bad example. That's like, I don't even care. Socks don't match. It was
Yeah.
more of like, I just wasn't proactive. I wasn't prepared. I was always in a reactive, chaotic state. That's just where I lived. And that's where I was comfortable because that was how I was raised. It was what I knew.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I guess I can do something different. What will make the most difference? And now it's absolutely amazing how much not only my boys have benefited from the shift, but also I had a chance to kind of breathe and adjust to how I wanted to be in the world, which I'm an extrovert. I love being around people. I thought that it would be all of my dreams come true. Like, honestly, I remember being a single mom and I was probably 21 at the time. And I remember thinking, like, envisioning what my dream was. If I could just find a job that I could drop my kids off and I could go to work and then I could get them after work. Like, I literally thought that was the pinnacle. I had made it if I could do that. And then I got there and it was great. There was a lot of great things about it. But as we know as moms, it doesn't always go as planned. And so I couldn't believe how much stress it was when they don't go to school every day. there's and then there's extra energy and effort they take even in the hours that you are home. And I hate to admit this, but also I'm like, oh my gosh, it was so much better when I didn't pick them up till 5:30 because then we only had like a couple hours together. I could really be all about them. And it's like when you have them from the minute they're done with school and then have to be responsible for all that time from when I'm like, this is a lot of time. And then if they don't go to school,
Yeah, especially if they're kiddos that like have to exert a lot of energy, right? Like if they have to like always be moving or doing something, otherwise, you know what I mean? Or they're just bored and then they just go like into old habits. So it's like you almost feel like you're planning your like you plan your day after your day. Like you have 2 days. You have like the school day, and then if they don't go to school, that's a whole nother thing. And then when you pick them up, then you have your after school day, and then you're doing
yeah,
that, and then you go to bed.
yeah.
Starts over the next day.
And I would try and explain it to my husband because, as long as we've been together, he's leaving the house before they wake up for school and he's getting home when it's bedtime. And sometimes during peak season, they're already in bed. So he's not even doing bedtime at all. So trying to explain to him some mornings, I'm already exhausted when they just got on the bus. I'm like, now I got to go shift gears and be on to manage all of these other people.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
and so I had been in that like go survival mode for so long. So extrovert, being around people, putting out fires, go, go, go. And then it's like, okay, you can work from home and my office is in my bedroom and I get them on the bus and then I come sit down and I'm like, okay, here's my job. It's such a shift. And
Yeah.
it took so long to realize how much of my stressors I put on myself. I'm like, I'm sitting here working. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't get this done by this time and this and this. And so I'm still internally, I'm still in that hurried, chaotic state, even though the external factors aren't there. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, what is happening? Why am I? And then, so obviously, side note, I've been in therapy like every week for many years. And so it's like, huh. She's like, so if that didn't happen by that date, then what? Um, uh, like I manage myself. I don't have some supervisor that's like, you didn't this, that, right? But we all create a structure, and the structure is what keeps our sanity and keeps everything moving. And it's like one thing goes off, it can domino, right? So that's just what I've created to make sure I thought that that structure was what was reducing my stress. And then it wasn't until I had time to be alone and reflect and actually slow my mind down that I realized, it's not the end of the world if I don't do it till tomorrow. Like it literally is. Yeah. So it's been a great opportunity for me to learn a lot about myself and what I like and don't like. And I've had a chance to create different structures. And I also have realized that, sitting in front of a computer for 20 hours a week and only getting one day around people is just not really my ideal.
Yeah.
It's tough to just trudge on through, okay, that task, now this task. And it's all like, I love the book work and the paperwork, don't get me wrong, but I didn't realize how much of my job was spent just helping others. And it's like, oh, now, okay, I'm needed here. All right, I'm needed here. Okay, now my boss needs to talk about this thing. And now the patient needs me for this. And now, and that's just my comfort zone. That's kind of, again, how I was raised a little bit. So, yeah, so it's been eye opening. And I don't really know what this next chapter is looking like because the business is going through a bit of a transition and they need me a little more right now. And so they've been asking for me. And so I'm right now in the point of needing to make a decision of how much I want to commit. It's been almost 3 years. So part of me wants to be there more, but then I have that anxiety piece of, do I want to go back
Yeah.
all the time? So
I,
that's kind of where I'm at mentally.
I like how you shared, there's a key statement that is pretty powerful that you shared about, slowing down enough to be able to recognize like inside of you, because as like you said, you're going all the time, you're doing all of the mom things, you're doing the job stuff and all of that, that if you don't take the time, I just think it's interesting that your path that you were on almost kind of forced you into slowing down to check in with yourself to really realize like, oh, wait, hold on. I'm running this pattern and I'm running this thing, but it's not really happening right now, but I'm still running it. And then you're just like, wait, why am I running that? And then like questioning it and then kind of challenging it a little bit so you can be like, okay, instead of like, la, 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 like the whole
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
it's
The
really
survival
important to
mode.
do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important to do that as moms. And I think it's very easy for us to get stuck. I call it in the hamster wheel of just doing all the, doing. And okay, yeah, next, next, next. And even when you're exhausted, it's like really hard. Right. And so I think it's super important that if we don't take that time, makes it so much more confusing and almost like we're momming through mud instead of like flowing like with the river. It's like we're walking against it, like, oh my God, okay, we're gonna do morning routine or whatever it is, like you said, and then you're like exhausted. But when you do the whole checking in and figuring things out and you work with yourself, it's so much easier when you're doing it together. It's like it goes together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole giving my notice and making a change.
Yeah.
I don't know if have admitted this out loud to anybody, but I was literally working with my therapist about that for like 2 years prior to actually doing it. Like it was so hard for me
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
even ask or even like I knew how devastating it was going to be to my boss because in a way we built this practice together. We had like a total of 5 employees, like all of us. There's like her, me, and like it was just not very many in the beginning, and we were much slower. And now we have like 14 employees, and it's just we expanded and like it's just been quite an evolution. And I've been there since the beginning. She bought the practice in '05 and I started in '06. So I knew how much she was not going to want to hear that.
Yeah.
And I have this hard time of disappointing someone and having the either informing them or asking them or whatever if I know that they're going to be disappointed or I'm going to make them have negative feelings of any kind. It makes me literally sick to my stomach. Like it's like, whoa. and and then this was pre-COVID, and then COVID happened. And I'm like, I can't leave now. Like that would be just like, yeah, right. Like this is you don't leave the people you love in when they're in the middle of a crisis. Like how would you like it wasn't even something I could consider, right?
Yeah.
And so that's another thing is learning to prioritize myself and learning that there are like being able to see choices when I don't think there are choices.
Right.
That's
Right.
been a big jump in the therapy as well. Like I can't tell you how many times I'm like, well, I that's not an option. And she's like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Because like that's like what? No, I can't even consider that. But
Mm-hmm.
why? I'm like, oh, so then so it was
Stop
hard.
asking me the questions.
So it was hard in the beginning, but that's what therapy is practicing and learning. And then it got to the point where I started asking myself, do I have to make this choice? Can I say no to this person?
Yep.
Can I choose to make this? And then they might potentially be disappointed, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been a lot of growth for me. So I do think that it's been quite a privilege to have this time to slow down. One
Yeah.
thing I also noticed is, we all do it in different ways, right? But when you're in that survival go mode and you don't have the opportunity to slow down and reflect and think about yourself, that's kind of amazing in some ways because when you are slowing down and looking at yourself, it's like even when I had the time, I'm like, okay, I have time right now. And then all of a sudden I was just had so much pressure about using the time properly. Like it's like, but you have this time. So now
Yeah.
you're supposed to be able to cook all of these wonderful meals and you're supposed to be able to have a perfect workout routine. And now you got to focus on skincare. You're 40, like I have like all of these things. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, and then I'm like, oh, but I don't want to do any of them. Is that okay? No, wait. And then it was just like, I found other ways to kind of occupy my time and check out, so to speak. And so being able, just because you have the time to self reflect doesn't mean you always choose that. And so
Right.
having to actually go take a breath, sit with your thoughts as uncomfortable as they are. And yeah, and it's tough. It's trudging through it is tough, but it's better on the other side. And I'm
Yeah.
a work in progress. I've still got a long way to go. But when I look back, that's another thing I'm learning, looking back and seeing how far I've come because being such a goal oriented person, it's really easy to be perceived as never being content and never being happy because you're always working towards something more or better. And I'm guilty of that for sure. But then pausing and looking at back and seeing where I was and where I am, come a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also, that I'm glad that you said that too, because there's also so much in that, like looking, because of that, because you're like next goal, next goal, next goal, right? Because you're like goal oriented, that sometimes, you got to turn around,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you got to look back because then you're like, oh, it's definitely like a reminder of like, whoa, I was way back there and now I'm all the way up here. So it's like a reminder to yourself, kids, time to turn around and see how far, and how far you've come and what that looks like of where you're at. So then it can kind of motivate you too and help you push forward. Like, wow, look at all this I have done. So let's go do some more.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I know that you've said some things about like your momhood. Do you want to share some more about what that looks like?
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking about this before the interview. I'm like, how far back do I go? What do I want to talk about? But how we were raised as kids really comes into our defining us as a mom, and so I I had a mom who I still have a mom, by the way, but when I was in, my youth, she just to give you a little bit of a framework, has 4 kids by 3 different guys. She was married 3 times, divorced 3 times. She didn't marry my dad. She got pregnant right out of high school. And so she had me when she was 20. And my mom and dad weren't really together. And then she ended up marrying this other guy who was not kind. He was quite abusive and alcoholic, and they weren't together very long. But I do have a brother out of that. So she basically had a kid every 4 years. And then the next guy slash stepdad, he's the one who raised me the majority of my childhood because he was with me from uh, like 4 to 13, I would say. Isn't that sad? That's the longest I've had a parental figure, the male. My biological father is still there, but he's not reliable and hasn't really been a constant at all. But anyway, so she had 2 children by him, and he also had substance abuse issues, and it's a very complicated history that we don't need to get into, but it definitely impacted me for sure. They got divorced. He ended up getting killed in a drug deal gone bad. And she was single and ended up having multiple boyfriends and stuff throughout the rest of the time. But because of that, I was promoted to parent, so to speak. And truthfully, even before they were divorced, I had a lot of responsibilities. When I really look back and reflect, I'm like, I think I was in the parenting role a little earlier than that, even. It just kicked up a notch when she was alone, because then I would come home from school and then she would go to work. And so I had them the rest of the time. And sometimes she wouldn't come home right after work. So I I definitely had a lot of responsibility. I was the oldest. If you asked me back then, I would be like, this is horrible. This sucks. Everything's like, what the hell? I'm not supposed to be a mom yet. My little sister actually called me mom when she was first talking because like they just had me more. And so fast forward when I ended up getting pregnant unexpectedly, unplanned on my 19th birthday, I I was freaking out, and it was definitely not what I was planning and what I wanted. But I also knew that I could do it because I had a lot on my plate already. And so I'm like, well, we're gonna do this. Okay, I guess I can do this. And I didn't end up being with his dad at all, but I kind of buckled down, and I ended up, thank God, there were services that helped me. I was able to get some assistance with daycare so I could still go to work and get assistance with an apartment. And then, so I moved back in with my mom in December. No, 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 that's not right. I was only with her for like the month before. So he was born in August. So I think I moved in with her in July. He was ended up being a preemie, and he was born like 5 weeks early in August. And then I moved out in December. And so I got my own apartment in December. So I have been on my own with him ever since then. One thing about being a grocery cashier at that time is union. So it was amazing benefits. I had great medical, and I was able to be home with him for 12 weeks. And that's pretty special to be able to have that time. But then I worked full time, and it was quite a long, long road. But I'm a very determined person, and I can think big picture. And I definitely have been able to delay gratification, so to speak, by sacrificing the wants and desires for the long-term goals, which because of that, I was able to buy a house when he was 4. And that was up in Everett. So I did have to have a bit of a commute, which had its challenges. But one of the things that was a driving force, I'm so stubborn, is I was trying my hardest not to repeat the cycle. And that was one of the things that was so devastating. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to repeat the cycle. And here I am, pregnant at 19, not with the dad. Like I'm repeating the cycle. Like, I was so sad. It was just like, and he's such an asshole. Oh, sorry. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
I was just like so I to the point of where I was willing to be with him. I was like, okay, you've been trying to get me back for how long? Okay, I'll give it a shot. And then all of a sudden he's like, maybe not. I'm like, okay. I mean, thank goodness, right? Like that would have been terrible. But at the time I was devastated. And so it was quite an interesting turn of events. I I feel like I was just kind of going through the motions and in survival mode for so long. But I was just stubborn and independent, and I was determined to do it on my own without asking for any help. And that sounds ridiculous because obviously I did get help with the assistance programs, but I never asked like family for any money. Or my mom, found out she was going to be a grandma, so she went out and bought a Mustang convertible. Like she was not. I'm like, oh, you got a car that doesn't even fit a car seat in the back? Got it. Okay. I'm hearing loud and clear. She was a total workaholic and definitely not going to be a hands-on grandma. My dad, yeah, right. He couldn't even be a dad, let alone be responsible beyond that. And actually, my dad happened to be having a baby at the same time because me and my stepmom were pregnant at the same time. So that was a whole other interesting factor. Um, yeah, so it really did shape who I was though, because when you are so hyperly independent, the bonus of that is like there's that confidence in knowing you can handle your shit. And you're like, I'm just gonna do it. I don't need nobody. I don't need, whatever you do you. I'm gonna do me. I can do this, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And like stubbornly to a point. And that works really great until it doesn't anymore.
yeah.
And now I've been married for 12 years. So you can't really have a successful marriage when you're like, I don't care if you don't want to do this, you can just go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
People don't talk about that very much. At least I don't hear about it. It's like, the plight of the single mom. And yeah, there was so many challenges about being a single mom, not having a second income, not having anyone to rely on, having those times where you're like, can I just go to the store by myself? Can I just take a nap for 5 seconds? Can I, like all of that is absolutely true. And not having to consult someone else about parental decisions,
Mhm.
not having to be cooperative about anything, In some ways, it's like, oh my gosh, it's all on me to make the choices. But then in other ways, it's like, it's all on me to make the choices. I get to do it, So it was quite a different transition so I had my second child when Jaden was 11. And so quite a big gap in between there. And then having the whole blended family, so to speak. My husband didn't have any children, but being a stepdad is hard. And so going through that process was very challenging. And then having a couple children of our own and then trudging through that and learning as we go was quite a process. And it was a lot of really hard years. But we have, and lots of therapy, but we have gotten to the other side now where I feel like we have really gotten in a groove. And instead of combating each other, we're working together and supporting each other. And we're more of a team than adversaries at times, it felt like. And part of that is because we're both doing our own work. So that's a huge part of it. Like he values personal growth, I value personal growth. And that is essential. And so me being able to actually be vulnerable and have somebody help me
yeah.
was not as easy as you would think. But I've gotten better. And so yeah, um, I feel like it's a never ending process. Learning kids, man, I tell you, kids are a big fat mirror. They sure tell you a lot about yourself. And if you're willing, they can really help you grow. And one of my biggest driving forces too is trying to break some generational cycles, which is tough, you know. trying to not have that bitterness and resentment for my mother and the empathy for, well, she's just repeating the cycle, right? This is what she learned. And then, and trying to break that with me. And so feels like a lot. And I try really hard not to compare myself to other moms because that's never fun.
No,
I'm
no, it's
like, I'm like, oh my God, they're so amazing. She's like a super mom. How does she do all that? Oh my gosh. And then that's when I look backwards and I
yep.
go, you know what? We didn't all start in the same spot.
Nope.
And so I'm not an abusive alcoholic, you know? Like I am not, I show up. I don't just like leave for the night. Like I actually listen and validate feelings. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like there are certain things that are I have to remind myself and give myself grace for the choices that aren't the best because I've made plenty of mistakes. But yeah,
And that's how you learn, right? You learn from all that stuff.
yeah, and realizing something I realized, I don't know, in the last few years, and this is just more observing extended family and different observations of like, you really, as a parent, you can screw up a lot. You can like mess up a lot. But if you're able to come back and own it and apologize and then show up differently, oh my word. Like it's crazy to me. Like it's even like you watch these shows and videos and stuff, it's like it can happen when your kid is like 60. You know,
Yeah.
like there's repair that can still be done. It's not too late. And
Yeah.
that's amazing. Like no matter how much time goes by, people want that from their parent. They want to hear, some sort of acknowledgement. Now, to be clear, acknowledgement with changed behavior, because I definitely heard of plenty of, oh, I was just the worst. I'm so sorry. I was the worst. And then doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So that's manipulation. But really truly owning it and showing up differently, man, it's not too late. And so I keep holding on to that too. And I feel like one of the things I'm good at is going back to my kids and saying, I just need to apologize. That was not okay how I talked to you. I was frustrated and lost my temper, and that is not a good excuse. And, and let them talk and let
Yeah.
them, just tell me how they feel and give them the opportunity to be heard. And yeah, so I think that's really important. So
I
I
love
made
that.
some smart choices too.
I love that because it's funny because you also have to do like, especially if it's not your, pattern or whatever, but like you have to do some internal work to go back to have the conversation, right? Because you have to like own your stuff and have some humility and be like yes and do the whole accepting of that you messed up and then admitting it and doing it at the same time. You're leading by example, right? So everything that you do is like planting seeds in your kid's brain. So doing that is also passing a baton, if you will, of having them do the same thing. But it's so funny how you can kind of grudgingly at first, because I do the same thing. I go back if I need to go back, it's like, okay, it can be whatever. Like you said, it can be 3 days, it can be 2 weeks, it can be whatever. So you got your time to work through your shit
Mm-hmm.
to go back and own it and then be like, hey, this wasn't okay. I need to do better. I'm going to do better by this, and giving them examples at the same time. You're teaching them to do the exact same thing for themselves with the people around them. And it's funny when you sit there and, it could be like a Saturday afternoon and you're all chilling together and something happens and then you see your kid do that exact thing and you're like, oh, it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, this is
Totally.
great. It's happening. It's sticking. It's in there. It's in the brain. Like, that's how you know. That's how you
Yeah, I
know.
see my kids do it all the time. Like they're way faster than me too. They can come back and realize it a lot faster and apologize a lot faster. And another thing that was a bit of a shift for me, didn't realize I was even doing it. But my middle child can be quite emotionally reactive, and he's a lot better now, but he used to be very, he would get in this really dark spiral, and everything was the woe is me and the this is so awful. And I had a really hard time giving him space for that. I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, this is what you're complaining about? You don't even know how bad, you don't even know how good you have it. Oh my God. You don't like, and then I was like, I'm hearing my mother,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then but I still, and then I knew I shouldn't say those words, but I was still thinking them. I was still feeling them even when I didn't say it. And I'm like, it's going to be okay, or I would try and shift into fixing it, or if I could just talk enough to help him gain perspective, that'll be better. It's like, how often does that work, right?
Right.
Never. And so I I realized how often I was getting defensive or reactive when he started complaining about something, and I think part of that was because I was feeling this pressure to fix it.
Yeah.
And then one time I just was like, I know, buddy, that sucks so bad. I completely understand why you feel that way. And then I gave him a hug, and that was enough. And I was just like, what? Whoa. It was like this light bulb went off. And I was just
Yeah.
like, I don't need to fix it. I don't need to tell him why he should feel a different way. I don't need to convince him if he just looked here or did that, then he would be all better. Like, no, he just needs someone to be with him and let him know that I'm there regardless of how he's feeling. And so
Yeah.
that was a really big shift for my relationship with him. And I think that made a big difference. And then I was like, maybe that'll work in other areas of my life.
Yeah. Let's try it out. Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Oh, I love that. I love that. So what would you say that your superpower is?
I don't know. This one's really hard because I'm not great at tooting my own horn, so to speak. But the thing that keeps coming back is like resilience, like grit and resilience, I would say, is something that is kind of a superpower. I didn't realize it for a long time until you get older and you realize how many people don't have it. Then you're like, oh, wait, maybe this is kind of special. And I don't mean like just getting through this, that, or the other, but to actually get through it, still have hope
Mhm.
and positivity about things getting better or doing better or being better, and the grit to actually work on it
Right.
instead of just getting into that disheartened place and feeling like, what's the point? And I'm not going to say I haven't been there, but it's acknowledging it and still trying, and then still pushing through, and still having a kind heart and not having that bitter heart full of bitterness and resentment,
Yeah.
and super cynical. I feel like I'm still able to have empathy and realize, we are all going through it, and it is not me to judge somebody else, and I'm just gonna keep on trucking.
I love that. That's a really good one. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, it has been really awesome to hear your story and everything that you've shared today. I love that. I love all of the things you said, especially your superpower. As women, we have many of them. I think that sometimes it's just harder for us to see them. You know what I mean? Like in the
Yeah.
moment when you're put on the spot for the question. So I always like to ask that because I think it's important for us to reflect and actually look and see what that is. So thank you for sharing your superpower also with us today.
Yeah,
And
I think it's really interesting since we've known each other our whole lives. So I'm like, I'm going to be telling her my story, and she literally knows my entire story far more than what I've shared today. So, yeah.
I love it though. I love it. It was great. It was great. Well, thank you for being on the show and
Thank you
sharing
for
your
having me.
stories.
Yes, it was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, learned something new, or got some gems to take away that will boost your week. I release a new episode each week, so make sure to click that follow button to not miss what is coming next. If you love the show or want to share a story, send me a quick message. I love hearing from listeners. If you know someone who needs this episode in their life, go ahead and share it with them. I'm sure they would love you for it. If you are looking to connect more, check out the show notes for all the social links, my website. I would love to hear how this episode helped you and what you loved about it. If there's a topic you want to hear about, send that too. All right, ladies, now is the time to release your inner power.